Welcome to the AI Frame podcast, a space where we explore how founders, innovators, and investors are navigating the world of artificial intelligence. Each episode brings you thoughtful conversations with people redefining how technology meets strategy, separating what's real from what is noise. I'm Ana Rojo-Teurua, doctor in mathematics, AI consultant and strategist, and your host. So grab a coffee and let's frame the future of AI together. Today's guest shares a background that is quite close to my own, and that is mathematics. Joining us today is Benjamin Mardel, founder of Epicure.ai, a consultancy focused on helping enterprises cut through the noise around artificial intelligence and build things that actually work. Benjamin studied mathematics at the University of Bristol and later specialized in data science and machine learning at UCL. In this episode, we'll talk about the role of mathematical thinking in artificial intelligence, the strategy behind building systems that solve real problems, the investment side of starting an AI company, and what it's really like to build a startup from scratch at a young age. So welcome to the podcast, Benjamin. How are you?
Hi, Anna. Thanks for having me today. I'm feeling great and very excited, and also having a discussion with a fellow mathematician is always awesome.
I'm going to ask you the question that I ask all of the guests of this podcast, which is, who are you? And what was the journey that led you to founding Epicure.ai?
I'm Benjamin, and as you mentioned, I did mathematics at Bristol and then a master's in data science and machine learning at UCL. But what really formed my perspectives and approach to AI and mathematics were my experiences in early stage startups. So I did quite a lot of fintech and biotech, and that's where I discovered machine learning and AI and saw the various applications and saw the importance of evaluations and knowing when to pick certain metrics, certain architectures. And then that's how I fell in love with the discipline, and where I also developed an appreciation for the creative side of things. Often scientists are seen as being rigid and sometimes systematic in the negative way. You're always doing things a set way. However, from my opinion, the two do not have to be mutually exclusive. You can be systematic and creative at the same time. And it's when you actually put these two things together that you can create very cool and production-ready products.
I totally agree. I actually had a conversation with someone not a long time ago about what creativity actually is. I was telling her that one of the reasons I studied mathematics was that I wanted to know the answers of things, and I wanted things to actually follow a very rigid logic, which I think is what you're talking about, like the preconception of mathematicians and what mathematics is. But the more I studied mathematics, the more I realized that I needed to be creative to actually solve the problems and thinking really out of the box to find the right solutions to the proof of the theorems that I was trying to solve, but also how I was applying what I was learning in my degree into the real life. I ended up doing something really, really theoretical. And I think if it wasn't for the creativity side of things, it would have stopped in there. I wouldn't have been able to apply it in the real world.
The greatest mathematicians and physicists are the most creative, right? Because even if you look nowadays in a classroom, when you have the guys who are able to do the homework sheets and able to copy and paste the same steps A, B, C, D to get the final answer, and those who are able to do the really hard questions, they're able to take the lessons and then see things which are not obvious and make the links and say, well, actually, if you put this in there, then you can rearrange, you can eliminate. And those are things that if you only do what you're told and what you're taught and do not think of links with other stuff you've seen without being told, you cannot see and figure out. And I think the greatest scientists have been the most creative humans. Even Einstein has, I think, said that to be able to come up with his theories, he had to tap into this creative sense, things that he had not seen before. Otherwise, he wouldn't have found the missing pieces.
Are there other aspects that you've taken from studying mathematics, talking about soft skills, right, that you're applying when it comes to finding AI solutions for your clients?
For me, the things which are very important are being systematic in the approaches. So firstly, there are the problems you are told And then there's what you have to understand and guess from what was not spoken. For example, someone would usually say they have a problem, but that problem usually can be broken down into smaller modular sections. And then within that, you have to guess, well, what isn't being told? Just like you would with a problem in mathematics, you're given a question and you have to break down and then figure out, well, actually, I learned this, there, and then how to puzzle it all together. So there's that aspect. And then seeing what do I currently have? So like tech stack expertise and what's missing. And I think a big thing about having that mathematical thinking is also knowing your limits. You know what you know, and you need to know when to ask for help. The reality is there are stuff which you can't do, or you have to be aware of like time constraints, etc. And therefore know all these pieces and how to put it together to create an optimal solution or optimal roadmap to a solution. Yeah. So these are things I always take into consideration. And I think collaborating is always better than working solo, because even if you're an expert in a field, someone else with an outside perspective or even the same expertise as you could give you an idea. And even if they say something that's wrong, that's perhaps wrong in the moment, it could always spark something. Then, for me, there is part of like the work is serious, but to make the work enjoyable, I think even very serious work can be gamified.
Yes, 100%.
And I always try to do that, and that's what makes working on products really fun.
With all this AI hype that is at the moment, do you think mathematical thinking is being undervalued, or are we actually moving to a more theory-driven understanding of AI?
I think it really depends where you look.
Yeah.
If you go on LinkedIn and stuff, you could see that people undervalue it. They think that nowadays with no-code solutions and certain tools, you can throw away that mathematical thinking. And people, I see posts, you don't need devs anymore. Look at what I created. Yes, you can create really good MVPs or interfaces to show what a potential product would look like. And for certain products, you do not need all the infra, etc. And you can put something in production very easily, and it would work for a small number of users or within a certain environment. However, for big infrastructures and things that need to scale, I think there are serious considerations in terms of good practices in dev, mathematical thinking. And why the dev side is very important is because there is that practice of knowing how to put test cases in place, also logs to be able to very quickly identify when something fails and then rectify that. The whole idea that the mathematical thinking is being undervalued is true if you spend all your time on LinkedIn. If you actually speak to people who are in the field or who are in research, because a lot of industry is also driven by research, maybe nowadays a lot less in academia than before, but nowadays these companies have so much money that they have these kind of really good academics in-house, in a sense. People might think it's separate, but I see as now these scientists, PhDs, etc., are in-house and just engineers instead of being seen as academics. And the reality is that I think there is a fine balance. Where it's important to say that mathematical thinking is not undervalued is that people also, I think, have less time than before because things move quickly, so they spend less time really looking deep at things. And in that sense, dev's work becomes a lot more focused on communication. That person needs to know very quickly, I have 5 minutes with a decision maker. I need to cut out all the noise, all the details on the tech. I need to tell him what he needs to hear. And those are, we on track for the KPIs, maybe ask for certain accesses, and be very clear on the problem, the specific problem, and why they are targeting that and their step towards a solution without going into the details which aren't necessary to a stakeholder who does not understand all the tech side of things.
I got the impression that since neural networks and then transformers were invented, we haven't looked back. Do you think that there is an opportunity to abstract a little bit more from all of these architectures and maybe thinking about more mathematical approach when it comes to develop new architectures in artificial intelligence? When, for example, you're doing hybrid search, cosine similarity, we are calculating those in a Euclidean space. Why? Why if it's a different space? Why don't we consider a different topology?
I am certain that some people are focusing solely on that. And
Right.
these are questions that I do ask myself, but it's not things I actually spend
Same.
practical time on. But I do question these things, and I think I would be very surprised if it's not things that Jan LeCun's new company are going to look into, because obviously they're going down a different track of models. They are very openly saying that they do not think LLMs will lead to AGI.
I think exactly the same, actually.
They are surely right on that. I think it's not really possible to focus just on LLMs and think that just brute forcing it will lead to AGI.
Yeah.
And us humans, some people learn more visually, others through audio, others have enhanced memory through senses, right? So who are we to think that models can reach AGI just through taking in text and videos the way they currently do? And also arguments that we hear is that, well, humans aren't actually general, we're really specialized. Also, what is the definition of AGI? Because does general intelligence mean that you think you're going to one day have one AI that can solve every single problem in every domain? If that's the actual goal, then I think we're very far away from that. Because even humans who are multidisciplinary, then again, I don't think we have the memory capacity of these LLMs in terms of breadth and depth in specialization.
It starts to become a more philosophical question. I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were defining intelligence, and I had to stop it and message one of my friends and say, I'm listening to this and I couldn't disagree more.
I think the key answer to that question is the person that limits themselves on what the definition of intelligence is the person that already starts from a failing point. I'm not clear on what AGI means. I see currently that regardless of the models, and just like any business, there's always going to be loads of different models for loads of different things. And I don't think there's going to be one model that wins on everything across every domain. And therefore, depending on your task, you're going to use different models. And by models, I don't necessarily mean just LLMs. I mean, whatever is going to exist in the future. And also, I think within a system of, let's say, agents, you may use one model for one part, another model for another part of the workflow. I don't think that we're close to one model solves everything. And even if we reach AGI, to what extent would it actually be feasible? If we were talking about a world where AGI was one model, how would it have access to data? How would it keep up to date? What would it even be trained on to even reach that level? And then if it had to be trained on everything, and assuming that's possible, how much does it cost for someone to have access? And does it mean that access will be very limited? And in which case do you want to give AGI access to, on an ethical level, should, if such a model were to exist, only be accessible to an elite few? Poses loads of problems. If you claim that an AGI exists and is able to do everything super well, and however it's only accessible to certain people, does that then cause a huge level of inequality?
Moving a little bit on the strategy and startup side of things. So you recently founded Epicure.ai. What was the moment that you realized that you wanted to build your own startup, your own consultancy, rather than working inside an existing company?
I didn't think that I'd be creating a consultancy. I always had the idea that I'd eventually want to create my own startup or product, but I didn't think I'd start through my own consultancy. The moment I realized, I was talking to many CEOs and decision makers about various projects in AI, just from a discussion point of view. And then I realized I really enjoyed talking about the strategic side of things. And then realized, well, actually, some of these were leading to people saying, well, would you be happy to develop or work on an MVP with me? And I would say yes. At first, I hesitated because I was like, well, actually, if I leave my job and, okay, I have 2-3 projects now, but what if I don't have anything in 6 months? What would happen financially? And then it came a point where I was like, actually, I've got an opportunity to do what I enjoy, work directly with decision makers. So being the bridge between the tech and the business, I have to go and take this shot while it's there. It may not present itself again. And that's where the name Epicure.ai comes in. So the Epicurean philosophy is to reach ataraxia, which is a point of tranquility and absence of fear. When I had all these doubts, I came to a moment where the question stopped in my head. And it was pure excitement to go start and actually execute projects and see what happens after. And I told myself, well, actually, if I do well, I will get referrals and all people want to continue working with me. So just had to go for it and seize the opportunity.
I think sometimes you need to take the risk. Building your own startup teach you things that you're not going to learn anywhere else. If someone is thinking of building their own startup, even if they have all of these questions, am I going to have projects in a couple of months' times? Am I going to have enough money? How this is going to impact my professional career? All of those things. You need to go for it. I think it's a really good investment. Even if it fails, it's a win. Because you're taking so much out of it and you can use that for anything that is coming in the future.
I completely agree. And also ask myself one question is, if I had stayed in the environment I was in, I think for me, I had reached a point where I didn't see much growth and had no visibility on the next 6 months. And in my mind, it's like, well, I'm working in everything linked to data and AI. Put the money aside. If I'm not upskilling, then in 1 year's time, even if, let's say I was paid very well, in 1 year's time, I wouldn't be in a position to go for promotions or try and integrate new companies because I wouldn't have upskilled in an environment which is moving nearly on a daily basis. So I was like, well, actually, there is less risk in trying to go and do my own thing and actually have projects and keep upskilling on a daily basis than there is to stay in this comfort of having a salary coming in every month.
Yeah.
But I understand that that's also a position of luxury to be able to have that option.
I want to add that a startup is also not for everyone. I think people, what they're finding in the professional career is stability and be comfortable and knowing that at the end of the month, they're getting a certain amount of money. And that is totally valid. I wouldn't have decided to start a startup when I did it with the first one. In those, I think it was 6 months that I was working there, I learned so many things, like the amount of learning that I did in those 6 months, but not only from a technical perspective, but also about how to talk to clients, about strategy, about investment, and about a lot of other things that I didn't even know existed when I started. That's something that has been so valuable and actually has determined the path of the rest of my professional career. So if I hadn't done all of that, I don't think I would be here today talking to you, actually.
I'm very lucky. I have a very similar experience. I'm very fortunate that pretty much all my experiences before I finished my studies or my internships were in startups. And therefore, when you're in startups, I think you're under a lot more pressure. However, you're learning so much and you're learning valuable things, and you are forced to also constantly think about how you're communicating. Yes. Whereas as a tech person, it's very easy to end up in an environment where you're told to dev or do your specific task. Also, every time I've been lucky, you're sitting maybe just next to the CEO or just a few desks away. And all the conversations are happening in an open space. So you get to hear those things, and you get to bridge an overall understanding of how the company works, and not just because it's small, everyone has to communicate, and you can't hide also behind your managers or stuff like that. So I remember if I didn't finish something on a Friday, I would be working on the weekend to do it by Monday, but I didn't feel forced. It's because I'm in a small team, people depend on me, they're all passionate about what they do. Even though I'm an intern, I want to show that I'm putting in 100% and I want to contribute to an important mission.
If you're in a startup in where the environment is healthy, it's very contagious. And it's
very contagious.
And it just doesn't feel like work. It just feels like, okay, I'm just doing something that I really want to do. One of the decisions that a lot of companies struggle with today is whether to use off-the-shelf AI tools or build something that is custom. So how do you think about the trade-off when working with clients?
The way it works is first you look at the problem and then you break it down and once you see the individual components, depending on the project and depending if we're starting from scratch or if it's something we're building upon, things will be different. But if we're starting from scratch and we don't even have the data, usually I'd say it's best to collect the data, do the data pre-processing, all of those things, and then work with something off the shelf to get a baseline or early results. I'd usually recommend that approach. And then because it accelerates speed of execution and time to an MVP. And then if time permits and if it makes sense given the business and the use case and what the future work will be also, maybe compare that to something that you build in-house. However, I tend to avoid building from scratch for an MVP because you don't have a baseline, you don't have something to compare it with. So it's always good to already compare with either frontier models or if it's tools such as, I don't know, a CRM or something.
Yeah.
If you can integrate that rather than creating it from scratch, it makes absolute sense because a lot of them are low cost nowadays and can speed the development by a lot. Because let's be honest, a lot of these tools are not the end product. They're a means to get to the end product a lot quicker. Nowadays, you have a lot of SaaS, right? And they're quite general. They do certain things, and for a lot of companies, they're sufficient. However, in a few years, I think we'll have a shift where personalized AI will be so accessible that the SaaS products, if they can't be personalized and just do what they currently do, then it might cause problems and people will go for personalized options. However, if it's possible to take a SaaS and ask the company or a dev to personalize it, then that's completely fine.
Yeah.
So it depends also the functionalities the client is looking for. And if using off-the-shelf means that we can adapt it, or is the off-the-shelf tool rigid and not easy to manipulate for the use case.
You also work with clients in different regions. How do you approach this? What are the different challenges and considerations that come into play when you work with people from different parts of the world?
GDPR is something that varies. Yeah. Also, taking into consideration culture is very important. For example, so I am French and I also have clients in France. On a general level, in France, seniority is something that people really look at. Like if you're new, even if you're really good, they look at which school you went to, how many years of experience you have, and they look at that a lot more than they do in the UK or the US. Like in the UK and the US, if you can be 20 years old, if you've done 5-10 projects and you've got proof that you can execute, people are like, you're amazing. You've got that fire in you. We want to work with you or hire you, whatever. In France, age matters, experience. And as I said, the school has a lot more weight. So you have to be a bit sensitive to these kind of criteria. Like, for example, it's sometimes tougher for me to speak directly with CEOs when talking to French clients. However, some of them are very flexible and they don't care. Some of them, if you're good, you're good, and that's it. There are also data and infra things beyond the GDPR. For example, I know like if you for business in the UAE, they've got deals with Microsoft and data centers in the region, which means that they try to be on those systems. And when you're working on solutions, you have to try and avoid anything that's not Microsoft.
Have you noticed how people approach AI adoption differently depending on where the world are? Because
yes,
I have. So I have the impression that in Europe, people have a lot of FOMO and they just want to implement AI no matter what. I get lots of European companies coming to me saying, we want to implement AI. And then the next question is, but why? And they don't know. So they don't even have a defined problem. They just want to implement AI because their friends in the other company are implementing AI. So they must implement AI. But then you go to other parts of the world and the approach is totally different. They have an actual problem. They have identified that AI can actually solve the problem, but what they don't have is the expertise to solve the problem.
So yeah, my experience is very similar. However, the idea of we want AI, but we don't know in what way, that I see pretty much everywhere. I think it just depends who you talk to. I'm not saying everyone, but I'm saying it's not one region more than the other. I think where it differentiates is that you have a lot of people who are eager to do certain things and create certain products in Europe, but because of regulation, they can't use certain models for certain use cases. Like, for example, with customer information and stuff, you have to use certain models which are compliance. It's something we see a bit everywhere, where loads of people say they want AI, but they don't know. It really depends who you talk to. And then in Europe, you have people who want to use AI and say, I want to use AI no matter what, kind of thing. And then you realize, well, actually, you say you want to use Claude and stuff, but with the regulations, you can't use certain models for certain use cases because you're working with customer data, sensitive data, and therefore you need to respect that. And then they don't understand and they say, yeah, but I want this model or nothing. And you're like, well, it's not possible. Obviously, I do not want to do anything that goes against rules, and it's in nobody's interest to do that. I understand the idea behind the regulation in Europe and why it's there. And if it was implemented on a global level, it'd be something super positive. But it's very difficult to not sometimes wonder if the European approach on regulation is just self-regulation while everyone else accelerates. Obviously, the idea behind it is very positive, but in practice, it's what it feels like sometimes. And I've also talked to clients where they said they want AI, and I'm said, oh, well, actually the solution is possible with just a mathematical optimization. And it's a lot better than using AI because you don't have all the uncertainty and the edge cases are clear to set out and mitigate against. And then they're like, no, but we want AI. And I'm like, but I'm proposing a solution that works the same, if not better, and removes the limitations. They say AI sells better.
They might know that a non-AI solution can solve the problem, but if the goal is to solve the problem and get investment, for example, then you put the AI badge and then your investor is happy because they're going to invest in an AI product, right? So they can tell their friends investors that are investing in an AI product because that is a cool thing and the hype at the moment. And talking more about investment, my understanding is that you choose to not get investment. So you're bootstrapping your company. What made you take the bootstrapping route instead of going for investment?
Well, firstly, the nature of my activity, I'm not creating a product or anything for myself. Providing a service, which means usually apart from admin costs related to any ordinary company, and mine is very small, my projections are purely based on how many customers I have and how much they are paying, all costs of dev and all the tools on the side of the clients. So in reality, if we're thinking, why wouldn't I take an investment? I mean, I guess I could have sought an investment. I'm not sure I would have gotten it given my activity. And also it would have meant a terrible valuation if you're starting from nothing and you're providing a service, you're not even building a product. So when you take in consideration all these parameters, the only thing I need to keep going is to ensure I have clients which are paying for a service. And if I have those, then normally I have enough to sustain myself and then grow from there. And an investment would have actually just, from my perspective, increased pressure, maybe also had an impact on how I want to do things. Because obviously once you accept money from an investor, you're
tied up to that. You have another constraint. You
have another constraint. Sometimes it's not the case for me, but if this is an interesting point for anyone raising money, is depending on who you accept money from. I'm not saying all VCs are the same or all angel investors are the same, but depending on who you accept money from and at what quantity, you might actually end up being under the influence or being pushed towards goals which aren't aligned with what you wanted when you first created a company. And again, just to make clear, I'm not saying they're all bad and stuff. I'm just saying sometimes you can find yourself in those kind of situations.
That's such an important point to raise, because if you have a very clear vision of what to do, you need to make sure that if you're getting investors, that they do align with this as well. And especially, I think, in the AI space, this can get very dangerous because there are lots of people that they don't know what AI is. And even worse, there are lots of people that think that they know what AI is when they don't know what AI is. And if that is your investor and you're building an AI company, that can get really ugly. So I think it's really good that you brought that point. I think you need to be very careful with who you choose in terms of investment. If you had to give one piece of advice to young mathematicians trying to navigate the AI hype and the AI boom today, what would it be?
So the number one thing is to not skip the fundamentals, especially if you're a young mathematician still in your studies, then you have more time on your hands. Ensure that these fundamentals are really solid. Do not waste too much time trying to use every single tool and stuff, because these will keep changing. What's important is frameworks.
Yes.
Stay curious. Work on loads of projects, because academics is really good, but there is a gap between having, 80, 90% averages, even if those are really high, and for just a few students, you can have even 100% average. If you actually haven't built anything, you don't actually know what you can do and can't do. It's also about learning what you can't do so that you improve on your weaknesses. And another thing is focus a lot, and I mean a lot, on communicating your ideas clearly with people who are technical, but especially with people who aren't technical. Those who can communicate very clearly are in a very strong position.
Totally.
Because you have technical capabilities. If you can communicate them very clearly to someone who isn't technical, then you're actually more valuable to a stakeholder than a technical guy. Because the truth is, we now live in a world where it's very easy to find someone who's very good technically. It's very difficult to find someone where you can talk to very quickly, succinctly, and get things done with. I've worked with people who have hired me just so that I can work with their technical guys, because they say I spend too much time with my technical guys trying to tell them to focus on one thing, and then they go the other way, and then trying to get them to refocus. And because I don't understand the technical, I'm saying yes to them, and then 5 weeks later I'm coming back or I'm being told a roadmap. I'm being told by someone else it should take 2 weeks, and the technical guy's telling me 3-4 weeks, because he's explaining it to me and it makes sense, but I do not understand his approach more than the next guy, so I can't really question anything.
Yeah.
So being able to communicate is super important, because you can bridge the gap between the pure technical and the pure business side of things.
Is such a good asset to have, 100%.
And for me, it's the funnest side of it as well. It's being able to think strategically, not just pure execution and just being told what to do.
Thank you so much for this. I really enjoy our conversation. I'm pretty sure that our listeners will enjoy it too.
Thank you very much, Anna. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the AI Friend podcast. If you like this episode, follow the show and share with someone who would love it too. I'm Ana Rojo Taurua, and I'll see you next time for another conversation that reframes how we think about AI.